Hi, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to look at some of the basic features of Abacus. First, let's open a file. Now let's explore some of the views into this repository that we've just opened. So here we've got a list of some of the two-dimensional views, and let's look at the organizational chart first. So this view here you can see shows various departments and organizations and what the hierarchy of them is. Now it's a strongly typed model, so when we look here at the head office, for example, that is an element of the type organization. Okay, and on this diagram we've got the stencil set up here to show that organizations are blue rectangles, departments then are these little team icons, and there's a grouping at the top which is the overall organization. So when we look at something like the customer service department here, it's using the icon we've defined down here. Now that brings us to the topic of what different object types we have in this repository. So these are defined up here in the types section. So when we look here we can see a list of component types, which are the things in our repository, and furthermore we can see a list of the connection types, which are the relationships in our repository. Now it's very easy to add new object types to repositories. Abacus is very flexible, so we simply just add a new component type here, let's say of the type team. Now to be able to include those objects in this diagram we have to associate that type with a shape, so all we do is simply drag it and drop it onto the shape we'd like to use, let's say a rectangle, and that appears in our stencil here, and we could easily add that now to our diagram. So let's say that's the architecture team. We can go and colour these icons and shape them as we like, so let's say for example to change this to be just an orange. So teams show up as orange rectangles on the diagrams. So just like that we can configure any views. We could change the different views as we like. So if the head office we didn't like using a rectangle, so those organizational types, we could go back here with the organizational type and replace it with something new. Let's say, I don't know, these blue men here. Okay, so you can see the diagram gets updated instantly. So any different icons that you'd like to use can be included in any different viewpoints, and of course you don't have to provide that capability to all users. There is what's called the designer mode, which is what I obviously have here, this run in designer mode. So without that you wouldn't be able to configure things and the meta model essentially would be locked down. Okay, but there's other different views that we might provide into a repository, for example a process map view. So that might just be a simple functional breakdown of the processes that are happening here. So we can go in here and we can follow the Manage Customer Service link, and that shows a simple process diagram like this with different starting events, different sequence flows, and then different processes and different results. So that's using a BPMN style notation, and of course we could also do that using a swim lane representation that you may be more familiar with, looking like that. So these different relationships here of course are connections, and they are of a certain type. So if we look here we can see that's a sequence flow, and that's as per designed in this stencil here that we have sequence flows. So that goes back to the different connection types that we may have defined. So moving on, you might want to do some application landscape views. So you could show some simple box and line diagrams like this with the support applications and the business applications. All of this of course is completely flexible in a meta modeling sense. You can choose to use TOGAF or Archimate or any number of other notations and combine them. Basically though, just documenting your business and understanding how the things all hang together. Now it's more than just that though. You want to start to put attributes in things. So if we're looking at an application here, there's any number of attributes you might want to be storing about applications. Its business fit, maybe the business hours, its status, any of those sorts of things. Further down here you might have some technical attributes like the disaster recovery provision, the operating system, all these different things. Likewise on connections you might want to have the frequency of the connection and its bandwidth and things like that. Now just like we were adding types before, you can add any attributes you like to objects as well. So if we come back here to one of these application types, we could go in and put an attribute in here which is the owner and their name or something like that. So you could add any new attributes that you like to instances there as you like. And furthermore we can go right down into the infrastructure of course and do some rich infrastructure modeling using very Visio-like shapes. So here you've got a very rich diagram showing the LAN and all the different switches and routers and things like that. We've coloured some of these shapes using a property here, so you can see the servers here have a background colouring. So that's been set up here on the stencil, where we're colouring according to the utilisation of those servers, which of course is an attribute on those servers. So if we look at that server there, we can see that it has a utilisation of 58%, which is why it's showing up quite red. That of course is the result of a performance simulation that we've run, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent course. Now, of course, all of this content has been put into your repository and you want to start to analyze it. So one of the first things you might want to do from an analysis point of view is produce a chart. So we saw before on this application landscape that there's a number of applications and they have a number of users and different disaster recovery requirements. So why don't we just do a simple pie chart now that has a look at the applications that have a disaster recovery at the gold level and see how many users there are. So we can use this dialog here to filter our repository. So if we come in here and filter it down to say, give me all the objects that have a technical property, where the property is disaster recovery and the value is gold. Now you can see that this has been filtering down here and we're left with just 5 applications. Okay, so we select those. Now we can go into here and choose the property we'd like to chart. So let's choose the number of users, and there we have it. We have a pie chart of basically the number of users of the gold applications in our repository. So we can go and configure this to be a little bit more understandable, and you can see there that, for example, application 2 has the majority of the users, 30 out of 54. Querying, of course, and doing impact analysis can be more than just charts. You might want to do a two-dimensional query as well. So let's have a look at doing a 2D query here, and why not let's have a look at the impact of changing a particular type of server. So if we go in here and we choose the viewpoint we'd like to do, so let's go and have a look at the servers that have, say, an IBM P590 implementation. You can see that that's filtered it down to just 2 servers. If we then have a look at what applications they're hosting, by doing this filtering we can see there's a collection of applications here. If we then have a look at what processes use that, we can select it here, and ultimately who performs those roles in the processes. So we've included the content here in terms of the processes, the people, the applications that are all potentially impacted by a change to this server. So let's just have a look at including some of the groupings above things, for example the locations the servers are at and the organizations within which the departments are, and produce that as a view. So this would be the IBM P590 impact of change or something like that. Okay, so Abacus will attempt to lay this out for you, and it uses a different algorithm to be able to do that. But you can see down the bottom here we've got our servers, and I can just refit that down the bottom there. There's then 2 applications, the website and the intranet. That in turn affects various processes. I'll just move these people out of the way. So there's a managed customer service process here. There's also a managed strategy and operations process there. There's a provide financial services one here, and a manage HR one there, which of course in turn then are affecting these different departments within your organization. So just like that, you can start to do some queries and start to do some interesting analysis around the repository that you may have built. Great, so that's just a quick introduction to some of the basic features of Abacus. So have a look around and have a look at some of the other courses that we've got here, and yeah, enjoy.